Hello again. The theme of today's looking back at Animorphs is lessons that the movie can learn from the TV show. And yes, you heard that right. I noticed, or rather took note of, I've always noticed these things, but took note of, in particular, from this perspective of thinking about the movie that's coming and the way that these things are made, certain things that I thought, that's a change. That's not necessarily on the helpful side, but it trims the fat or adds intrigue or whatever. And so there are a couple of things that I'm going to start with from episodes. Where are we? 13 through 16, 13, 14, 15, 16 of Animorphs, the Nickelodeon TV show. And the first one is there are more scenes from Visser 3's perspective. And the books, like this one, or these back here, except for Megamorphs, are typically from the point of view of just one Animorph. As I just said, the Megamorphs are an exception, but number 19, I think it is the first one that's not a Megamorphs, where an Animorph, a different Animorph, takes up narration of the story from the primary Animorph. But mostly they are perspective of one character. But throughout the show, you have scenes, the groups of Animorphs split up. That happens in these episodes. But also you get a little bit of Visser 3 doing his plotting. And that's actually adds a little bit of intrigue to the proceedings. In this case, they've got the disc, which is not in the books, of course, and hopefully won't be in the movies. But they've got the disc, and so Visser 3 is not just trying to catch the Andalites, he's trying to figure out the puzzle of the disc. And so there's a little bit of that in opening scenes, and also just Visser 3 threatening his underlings. There's actually a bit in, I think, the first of these episodes, which is based on 1/7 or 1/6 of the plot of Megamorphs 1, where you've got Yerkes always talking about if Visser 3 finds out, and it makes you wonder just how many Yerkes have run away rather than deal with Visser 3. But so that's a thing that of course the movie will probably not just be book 1. I've mentioned in these videos before, the movie will probably be some combination of books 1 through 7 or something, to different degrees. And so it will, of course, be more than one perspective. But a little bit of the villain mixed in, you don't always get. Like in the Harry Potter movies, it's mostly from Harry's perspective, but in the later books and in the later movies, you get a little bit of Voldemort here, a little bit of the teachers talking alone, on their own, without Harry there. And it's interesting to see how people behave outside of the context of our principal characters. So that was one way. Also, just they don't show every morph acquire. In fact, I think they showed them acquiring morphs in the first couple of episodes, and I don't know that we've seen them acquire much in the time since. And I find that that's fine. Not every scene of acquiring is going to be Jake getting his fingers up the Bengal tiger's nose. Now, some, like Book 7, Rachel acquiring the bear. That's an interesting scene. So I would hope to see that. I would hope that she doesn't. But on the other hand, if we haven't seen that, and if the audience at the movie is used to seeing her turn into an elephant for battle, and all the other Animorphs are used to seeing her turn into an elephant, and she turns into a bear, that could be interesting. But at the same time, that whole sequence of rebellious Rachel turning into an eagle, flying off, landing in the bear pen, demorphing, touching the bear, acquiring the bear, very dangerous, and then she morphs it for battle without testing it out, I think, is what happens. But I just found that when Cassie turned into a fly, or they turn into cockroaches, they turn into other things, and I found that I didn't mind that I didn't see, whereas in the books, you typically see them even if they're not that interesting. Like in the one where they acquire this, I believe 27, where they have to acquire the squid, and so first they have to get the whale so that they can use the whale to catch a squid, bring the squid back, and then acquire the squid so that they can then descend into the deeps. I don't think that if they do that, if they use that book, do that plot in one of the movies, I don't think we need to see that whole process. I think we could just, they have squids. Or maybe we do, I don't know. But that was just something. And then the third thing is not really a lesson to be learned, it's just from the nature of book to screen. I noticed it during the reveal of Visser 1, which before that we've seen pictures of Marco's mom twice. And he said, "This is my mom. This is back when things were normal." And so it occurred to me, like I knew I could see watching in the past, but it occurred to me, oh, we don't need, like in the book, it's a dramatic line, it's the end of the chapter, "Jake, it's my mom." Or I think Jake says, "Marco, it's your mom." And in the show, Marco says, "Jake, it's my mom." But the difference is, in this time, we don't need him to say that. It's important that he says that to establish, Jake's the only other one who would know, although they are the only two people in the scene in the show, whereas all the Animorphs are there in the book. But the reveal is a little bit more dramatic because, and they'd have to, in the movie, they'd have to make sure that they do this right, but we've seen Marco's mom, and so when we see Marco's mom walk out after Visser 3 announces Visser 1, we don't need it to be told, it's there, and it's the trappings of the book. The book has to do it the way that it does it, but it's better if we're not told right away, if we're allowed to have it land on us. So those are just three things that I took note of from the show that I thought this can work in the movie's favor. I am rooting for this movie. There's an article below, a blog post that I wrote today about my feelings about the upcoming graphic novels, but this is about the show. So on to the episodes in order. The first one, The Forgotten, which is actually the title of the 11th Animorphs book, I believe, the one where they travel slightly back in time via the Surreo Rip to, I think, the Amazon, and they have to figure out how to jump a couple of days into the future. Visser 3 turns into a vine monster. It's not one of the ones that I remember as well as Predator. So The Forgotten uses the Rachel plot line in Megamorphs, at least to an extent it does, where she gets amnesia because she gets disoriented in her bird morph and crash lands. For no apparent reason in the show. In the book, she's attacked by smaller birds, but in the show, she just crashes. It had a creepy image of the first thing she stumbles upon is a crazy old woman in the woods who happens to be an ex-controller whose Yerk died and fell out of her head. And this crazy woman in the woods, has managed to preserve her Yerk perfectly in, I guess, laboratory quality goo or whatever they use to preserve their specimens. So good for her. I wonder if that's from leftover scientific knowledge from the Yerk having been in her head, but it's a very creepy image. The Yerk in a jar, preserved in a jar in rubber cement or whatever that stuff is. The Yerks in this show, the ones she later encounters at the sharing, there's a sharing camp in the woods, and bringing in new recruits. The Yerks, like I said, afraid of Visser 3, very clumsy, kind of like the stormtroopers in Star Wars, how they trip all over themselves. They can't hit anything that they're shooting at. These Yerks in this show are and in the book pretty incompetent. They leave her alone. She's going to be yerked, as the crazy woman would say. Or no, Tobias says it. He's saying she hasn't been yerked when they're saying, "Where did Rachel go? Why is she at the sharing?" He says she hasn't been yerked, and that's a great new word. I don't know if that word is in the books. But she's going to be yerked, but they just leave her alone. They put it off, is what I'm trying to get at. And it's the same way that in the one of the previous episodes, The Stranger, based on The Stranger, um, the Yeerks capture Axe and Andalite in Andalite form, and they, I guess, knock him out, and then they leave him in a truck, unguarded, for who knows how long, while the other Animorphs are swept away to the future by the Elemist. And I don't know if I probably mentioned this in that video. They would have put a Yeerk right in the captive Andalite's head. If they had captive Andalite in his Andalite form, they would have put a Yeerk right in his head. But no, they've got to leave time for the Animorphs to rescue him for plot reasons. So that's just the Yeerks are James Bond villains. Like there's the classic, I think it's Goldmember, because I recently actually watched all the James Bond movies, and when I say recently, I mean at the beginning of quarantine, so it could be years ago. But I finally watched them all, including Goldmember, and Goldmember's the one, I think, where he's strapped to a table, and a laser is going to cut him in half, and the villain leaves, and everybody leaves, so he can be rescued. The Yeerks are Bond villains. One last bit about this episode is at the end, when the other Animorphs are trying to get Rachel to remember who she is, they say, think of a lion, become the lion, and I'm thinking, maybe coax her to turn into the house cat, something less dangerous, because if she turns into a lion and still doesn't remember who she is, that might be a problem. But turning her into a lion is better TV. And they have that lion, they may as well use it. They could have gotten a bear, they have a lion. So now on to The Leader, which is based on The Predator. They haven't used the title The Predator, so I don't know why they didn't use it for these two episodes. It's not like The Underground, where they used the title The Underground, and then they adapted the book The Underground, but they couldn't use the title. But anyway, one of my favorite books, Marco on the cover, by the way, and I bring this up in my blog post that I mentioned. Long hair. I have long hair. I had long hair when I was a little boy when I found this book, and I thought, okay, boy superheroes have long hair too. It was an important book cover, and it was an important book because it's a great book. It's an important chapter of the Animorphs, but the fact that Marco had long hair, that was important to me, and I bring that up in the blog post. So yes. Oh, and another new word, because these episodes that I'm watching, they have sometimes the bits and pieces from before and after the episode, and goes into ending credits, and it's the promotion for what's coming up next. And what was coming up next was continuation of Nickelodeon's Animorphomania. I like the idea of Animorphomania, so sharing that word. Let's see. These episodes kind of are an example of what I've mentioned before about how the Animorphs have a lot of their primary characteristics tamped down and throughout the show. Marco has been pretty okay with going along with doing the superhero thing throughout the episodes, as opposed to he does it in the books, but he's less. He complains a lot more, and suddenly in these episodes he's back to, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. Okay, I'll do it one more time, which is the whole point of the book, because the book gives him this story gives him a reason to fight. These episodes also include, because only Jake and Marco get captured by the Vissers, Cassie and Rachel finish out the plot line of The Stranger by going after the Kandrona in the EGS tower, which they all initially go after, and then using a little bit of the plot of this book with the anti-morphing technology, which it's not anti-morphing technology in Megamorphs, it's a monster, but same, it senses morph energy. Marco and Jake get captured, Rachel and Cassie go after the Kandrona in the EGS tower. Axe, nowhere except at the end. He comes in at the end. Why he didn't go on the mission, I don't know, but he comes in at the end. And Tobias is completely not there, I'm pretty sure. So let's see. Yeah, those are the main things from episode 1. Except I also had a couple of thoughts of would I, and this is another thing for people who go to the movie and watch the movie, but they haven't read the books, and probably there will be a lot of those. Um, would I be bothered by certain changes if I wasn't familiar with the books? Maybe not on first viewing, but perhaps on repeated viewings if I noticed inconsistencies. But that's just a thought that I had that I wanted to share. And also, some of the, depending on which YouTube channel I watch the Animorphs episodes from, sometimes I get the opening narration where Jake talks about, I was just a kid, but now I'm an Animorph. I prefer, and I prefer the theme song, the All in Your Hands theme song for an opening to Animorphs. Anyway, moving on for part 2 of The Leader. Great acting by Marco. When they tamp down their individual personalities for the most part, but when they have their plot lines, they have great moments. And Marco has some great moments with the reveal that his mother is Visser 3, Visser 1. A change that does irk me more than most changes is at the end of or as the episode progresses, Jake and Marco essentially escape on their own, whereas in the book, Visser 1 is sabotaging Visser 3, and he releases all of the Animorphs. And so, in this one, they get on the Blade ship themselves, and they undock from the mothership, but they do it on their own. They escape their prison on the ship on their own. They wander around on their own. So there's not the element of Visser 1 sabotaging Visser 3, which is their rivalry, is the beginning of us knowing about their rivalry throughout the whole series. All she does is, when they're on the Blade ship, Visser 3 says, we're going to kill them on the Blade ship. We'll be down 2 Andalites, and she says, no, I forbid anyone to fire on that ship, because that might be the Andalite that can open up the disc. So, not quite the same. A touch of Visser 1 saying, no, Visser 3, you may not have this victory. Visser 3 has some more great moments. And Axe actually does too. It's hard to have great acting moments with thought speak, which the Andalites use, and it's weird that the Andalites can use thought speak while they're in human morph, although I think that was established in later books that they can do that, but for a lot of the books they couldn't do that. I don't actually care. But you have a human face and you have the thought speak, and it's hard to do good acting moments when you're not opening your mouth and looking at a person and speaking to the person, but they managed to. Visser 3 with his threats, and then Axe later on guiding Jake and Marco on how to use the Blade ship to escape. So there's some good stuff there. And Cassie and Rachel, with the anti-morphing stuff, Rachel can't, and she doesn't have an elephant morph anyway, so she can't morph into an elephant and push the Kandrona out the window like she does in the book. So they just beat the pipes that keep it cool so that it overheats, and I think it explodes. I forget. Not as cool as the elephant pushing it out. And also not as cathartic as at the end of The Stranger the Elephant pushing out of the window. It's fine, though. Is what they had to do, because they had to use the whole special effects budget for those shots of the Blade ship flying around the mothership, which were pretty cool for that time. Reminded me of Space Cases a little bit. And probably more on Space Cases in future videos. So let's see. Any more notes from this one? Not a great line, but a notable line. It's space, what is there to see? I think Marco says it to Jake, or Jake says it to Marco, and regardless, you're in space, you're a couple of teenagers, there's a spaceship, there's an alien spaceship behind you, you're in space, what is there to see? It's just a weird line for adults to write for kids to say. They'd be awed. It's like in the Magic School Bus, the old version of the Magic School Bus. The first episode, they go to space, and just being in space is awesome. I guess they have other things on their mind, which might prompt them to say, let's not pay attention to this, but still, it seemed like a weird line. Just something I wrote down after the episode was over. So there's a blade ship in a swamp, because they're on a blade ship, they're flying a blade ship. They crash it in a swamp. That's what they say. They don't say it's not usable. So I don't know if maybe we're supposed to assume the Yeerks will find it and get rid of it, and they don't want to have anything more to do with it because it's dangerous, but still, there's a blade ship in the swamp. Axe could probably pilot it. That could be helpful, but not. I don't want to nitpick. One more episode, and this episode is not based on any book. It's kind of based on all Axe and Tobias books, but perhaps to make up for Axe and Tobias not really being in the last 2 episodes, except Axe was at the very end, or maybe he was in the beginning part of the plotting as well. This is just them on their separate journeys, and so a few notes on their how they're depicted, kind of clumsily. First of all, what we see of Tobias's life, his aunt does not seem like that horrible a person. She seems like she cares about him. And also the bully that he encounters is not that... is actually helpful. He says it in a mean way, but he says these are the senior lockers, the freshman lockers are somewhere else. And I guess maybe he was going to beat up Tobias or something. He's mean about it, but he is helpful. He's a helpful bully. And it's notable that Rachel is the one who comes to Tobias's assistance. In the book, in the first book, it is mentioned that Tobias is kind of faithful to Jake because Jake saved him from bullies. And Jake is also the one who Tobias comes to when he gets stuck in Morph. But we've already seen that the person Tobias comes to when he gets stuck in Morph, the first person is Rachel. And in this version, Rachel is... I mean, maybe Jake saves him from a bully at another time, although it seems like they don't know each other in the first episode, but Rachel is the one who saves him from a bully. And that's, they're playing up the romantic aspect, because it's... Well, they have Cassie and Jake, but the Rachel-Tobias thing is the more forbidden love and more Twilight-ish, because it's a not completely human and the teenage girl. So I think they knew they were playing that up, and they can make these changes to play that up. It doesn't bother me that much. It's just notable that that's the path that they decided to go down. Early on in the Axe portion, Cassie asks Axe if Jake's clothes fit, and it is of course from the book. When Axe is living with Cassie, he has to have clothes donated to him from the boy Animorphs, because he morphs into a boy. But in the TV show, he can morph clothes. Even, like, they morph clothes, they morph into animal from being clothed, and then they morph back and they're clothed again. Axe just constructed the clothes as part of the morph that he was constructing from all their DNA. So why does he need Jake's clothes, is my question. But it gives him the leather jacket that prompts Tobias to say, "You look like John Travolta in Grease," which is a very old reference that I'm not sure that the Animorphs would make, but Christopher Ralph, who plays Tobias's human form, actually does look kind of like John Travolta in Grease. Axe doesn't look much like John Travolta in Grease, except the leather jacket. So that just a thought that I had, that Christopher Ralph, actually, if I was going to cast John Travolta in Grease for the movie about John Travolta making Grease, I'd cast maybe Christopher Ralph. Axe is very kind of sloppy as a human going around. It's like he's not covert. He's not Andalite cadet trying to blend in and study the humans. He's and this is because probably it's a Nickelodeon show and they wanted to have some humor. It's a very serious show. Add some humor, make Axe behave goofily, but like for instance when the cab driver says change, and Axe goes, "Into what?" And the cab driver we've already have established, he says, "I don't shop in malls anymore because they're filled with humans who resemble you." The cab driver thinks all teenagers are weird, so it's okay that Axe is behaving weird, but still, if the cab driver had been a Yeerk, maybe he would have thought, can you change? Can you morph? Are you an Andalite? So he's reckless, more reckless than he should be. Let's see. Oh, there's a bit where, and I've gone back and forth on this. At first, when I first saw Axe eating the ice cream, or not eating the ice cream, but dabbing it on a shoe, I thought, why would anybody do that, whether or not they knew what to do with ice cream? And then I thought, oh, Andalites eat through their hoofs, so Axe is trying to eat it through his hoof. But then I remembered Axe already knows that humans eat with their mouths. It's a big thing that Axe does, is express the joy of eating with a mouth and the taste, so he already knows not to dab it on his foot. Or maybe this was before he had started eating, because it is a flashback, but still another reckless thing that might indicate that he's an Andalite. Let's see. Tobias gets his advice from the mysterious old black man, Fred, who sees Tobias in the mall, sitting alone, lost in thought, comes over and gives him some advice. I don't know if we're supposed to think that this is Elfangor's ghost human form or something. I've always wondered about that. It's just a plot device to get somebody needs to say to Axe the thing that Axe needs to hear about persevering. So it happens. Again, not the smoothest episode, perhaps because it doesn't have a book to be the foundation of. And then I'll end on this. The device that Axe uses to project their memories around them so that they can tell these stories to us, the audience, and to each other, makes Christopher Ralph appear, Tobias' human form. And funnily enough, and I know this wasn't deliberate, but the hawk won't look at him, which is kind of funny in a while they were making it behind the scenes sort of way, but it's also kind of poignant that the hawk Tobias wouldn't want to look at the human Tobias because he misses being human. But this also prompts Axe's great line, "It is an Andalite's belief that form is only a limited part of who we are." And then he goes on to say something like, that's why we developed the power to morph, but that's the essence of Tobias's journey, and why trans kids in the 90s found their started to identify and see themselves in Tobias. The idea that our form is only a small part of who we are, the form that we have, that we are given, that we have at the beginning of our lives at least, and that we come of age in, is not all of who we are and doesn't have to define us. And so it's a great line, and I don't recall that philosophy from the books being. I think that the morphing technology was not necessarily created for that reason, but for the TV show and maybe going forward for the movie, that's a thing to embrace. So in my next video, the end of Season 1, and then I'm going to split Season 2, because it's only 6 episodes, into 3 episodes here, 3 episodes here. In the meantime, ram the blade ship into a swamp.